All right.
Amen.
I hope y'all brought the offering trays tonight. We're about to learn something. I'm about to learn something. Anytime Dr. Holden is here presenting, I learn a lot. It's putting me back in school, and that's how I'm getting my education, from the wealth of knowledge she got. She serves not only UK, but the Central Kentucky history. The wealth of knowledge she will present will be beneficial. But listen closely tonight with respect to these names. William Tucker, Caroline Tucker, Hannah Tucker, Robin, William Tucker Jr., Patsy, the daughter of Caroline, Esther, William, Rebecca, John, and Mary. These are just a few names of enslaved people owned and sold during the institution of slavery in Lexington, Kentucky, Fayette County, Kentucky history. Who are these names? What is their story? What can we learn about the names from these records? Well, Kentucky County Court Clerk records spanning from the late 1700s to 1865 document deed transactions identifying names of enslaved people who were sold, purchased, transferred, conveyed, auctioned off, or even emancipated. Deed mortgage records of enslaved people who were used as collateral to secure a debt, and wills, estate appraisements, settlements, inventory, or other probate records, including enslaved people as part of an estate, and county court orders which list fugitives as runaways, and also contain other various information about enslaved people. Researchers, what can researchers discover? They will discover a wealth of historic information found documented in the Fayette County Clerk records, especially since Fayette County is one of the original 3 counties in 1782 that made up the entire territory called Kentucky County, Virginia, now known as the Commonwealth State of Kentucky. In 1785, Bourbon County eventually came out of Fayette County. Clark County was created in 1792 from both Fayette and Bourbon counties and was officially formed in 1793. That's why Fayette County and Clark County, that's their connection. And again, my name is Shea Brown. I'm here with Dr. Vanessa Holden. And we're going to talk to you today about the untold yet unforgotten stories of Black history, exploring Fayette County property records. There are often 2 sides to a story. Yeah. And we plan to explore these 2 sides of the life of William Tucker, share his story, and then narrate historic truths from seeing through the eyes of the Digital Access Project. And we're glad to have one of our digitization specialists and quality control team members, Susan. Wave your hand. Right there she is. Dr.
So the digital, we have this like preacher and professor thing that we do. We'll go back and forth. So bear with me because my voice doesn't boom exactly like that. But I'll throw in some multi-syllabic words. So y'all get your money's worth hearing Dr. Holden tonight. So the Digital Access Project originated long before my time at the University of Kentucky. A group of faculty members, including Kathy Newfont, who is a professor at the University of Kentucky, and also community members, wanted to have the deed books digitized. And you're probably saying, deed books? Well, that sounds kind of dusty and boring. What human stories are in a bunch of records of land transfers? And especially when the land records, when you go far back, say things like, well, you walk a couple of paces to the oak tree, and then you turn south, right? What are these records supposed to tell us about human stories? What are they supposed to illuminate about the rich history of human beings interacting in central Kentucky? Well, the Digital Access Project came about really in the midst of the pandemic. So in the midst of the pandemic, things are at a standstill. Some of us are getting some breathing room. Others are trying to figure out where do we go next with our research and with our projects. And the University of Kentucky came together with the Fayette County Clerk's Office in a really unique partnership. The clerk's office was mandated by Kentucky law to digitize these records, and the end date, the due date for this was only a few years, in the future. And so the land records, just like the other deed records, they were going to do the most sensible thing, which is start in January or December of 1989 and go backwards, because the more recent documents are the ones that lawyers and real estate agents are going to need. But Fayette, like many Kentucky counties, has a wealth of information from far earlier. A wealth of information that would have taken the clerk's office quite a bit of time to get back to. Handwritten, and let me tell you, you can tell when the clerks change over time, because that handwriting changes over time. Some were a little bit better than others with their script. And we said, well, look, we've got a way to bring in UK expertise, to bring in some students, graduate students and undergraduate students. We want to pull in community members into the project. And together, we can move from the earliest documents forward. And we'll meet up with the clerk's office somewhere in 1925, 1930, right? So we'll get this complete set of digitized documents way faster than we would have before. So we're under the fiscal sponsorship of a local nonprofit that actually supports nonprofits. So the monies are held in a community organization. They're not held at the university. And we look to expand access to high quality, and that's the key, high quality scans of these historic records. The records we're most interested in are handwritten. And so you can't just take any old photograph of them. You have to use what's called a book eye scanner. It's an archival grade scanner that requires some fine tuning to make sure you get the clearest possible picture. But the clear picture means that when you look at it at home and you need to zoom in to figure out, is that an L? Is that an E? Right? It doesn't get blurry or pixelated. It stays crisp. And our digitization specialists have also figured out what is the best lighting for each of these images. So we really are providing a high quality scan. In-person availability is still there. The clerk's office still preserves these books. You can still go to Fayette County. But that's not the easiest way for everybody to access these documents. It is much more comfortable, I can attest, to sit at home in your pajamas and do some light genealogical research than standing on a tile floor in the basement of the clerk's office. Yeah. At this time, we've reached roughly 150,000 pages of documents, 278 books full. And these books are about as tall as this, a little taller than our podium, and about as wide too. So there are often multiple documents on a page, which is why we're counting pages of documents. Exactly. It gets kind of dizzying. We're not just taking photos either. Our digitization specialists are making sure that we're back indexing so that you all can find what's in there. They are making sure to do quality control checks just in case something gets blurry, some transfer of megabytes doesn't go quite right, to make sure that we're providing the most accurate, clean information. Next slide. So here's a list of the kinds of records we started adding. We finished our deed books and decided to use our funding to get as many different kinds of documents as possible, including court orders. We have a whole section just for Henry Clay's will, which is actually held off-site, so you could request it, but now this makes it readily available really quickly.
I should have left after we did the deeds.
Old survey records, property tax records, and burnt records, as happened way back when. Occasionally courthouses would burn down or record storage would burn down. So we even have fragmented pieces of records, the surviving records from that fire, which allow us to provide records way back into the 1700s, all the way up into the early 20th century. This leads to an endless number of possibilities. And we're going to give an example, a case study tonight between the two of us to demonstrate how is it that the work that Shea does as a deputy clerk, preserving these documents, keeping these different types of documents in order, contribute to the kind of work I do as a historian, which is to read these documents, interpret them, and then be able to tell a story. Be able to tell a story that folks can readily understand about the past. You can learn about Central Kentucky history. Yes, you can research enslaved people and a system of slavery. We also have a number of students, and I'll say this, traditional age college students, by and large, have not been taught to read or write cursive, which is where our community members come in. Most of our community members are retirees, and they can read cursive. So in teams of often one of our students and then one of our community members working in tandem, they're able to interpret these documents more fully, which is a kind of community intergenerational synergy you really need to tackle this kind of history. And then we also get to do community education like this. I like working as a professor, but I don't like that a lot of my work is just unreachable to a lot of folks. I want to make sure that the work that I do is stuff that my local community actually benefits from, that people can see themselves and their ancestors in the work that I do. So how do you access DAP? And as Shea noted, a lot of times people hear Fayette County, and that's where we live. That's where Shea works as a part of the clerk's office. That's where we started. But Fayette is one of the original 3 counties in Kentucky, and so a number of counties do have some of their history in our records because they're records from before that county split off. Right. So if you're looking for very early records for this county, it's quite possible that we've got some because it was still Fayette at that point in time. So keep that in mind today as we talk about what's available in Fayette County.
Yes. Write these 2 websites down. They are important. Take a picture or something. This is how you access it. You go to the FayetteCountyClerk.com under Land Records. Obviously, it's Land Records Project, Digital Access Project. You can find instructions on how to look up old marriage records, old probate records such as wills, and in our DAP records. Once you get those instructions, then you click out, you go, because all county clerks had to start having an online portal. So we had to get a separate portal to house these images. So then you go to FayetteDeeds.com and you can pull up our DAP records. Like Dr. Holden said, we have wills, we have all kinds of records online and deeds and all this information you can have access to and look at the images and the indexes. We have the indexes. You can look at the indexes to find their names and print these documents out in research. And we just completed this past week the Fayette County school census from 1896 to 1910, and there are 2 sets of books, one for the black communities and one for the white communities, because those school records were segregated. So we don't have those loaded yet. It's a process to go through, but there's a lot of great conversations we're going to have about these records. Yeah, that website. William Tucker, a free man of color. That's who we're going to talk about today. William Tucker, a free man of color. What can we learn from the records about the story of William Tucker? Tonight, we're going to learn about his enslaver, his emancipation, his location, his family, his economics, and his story. Before we get into that, we're going to talk about some common myths.
So there are a lot of myths when it comes to African American history. I was taught when I was in K through 12 that, well, we can know general things, but when it comes to people in slavery, we just don't really have that many details. It's too hard to get to. Any genealogists in the audience have probably heard of the 1870 wall. The 1870 census is the first census wherein many African Americans are listed by name as opposed to as a part of somebody else's estate as property. And a lot of folk, when they trace back, they get to 1870 and they think, there's no way I can go past that. It is possible to go further back. And some of the documents we're going to talk about tonight offer way more than census records do, especially for enslaved people. So we're going to talk about Tucker's family, his journey from slavery to freedom, as a way of demonstrating this. One other myth is that all African Americans were set free during or right after the American Civil War. There are a number of free people of color who lived in the U.S. actually from the earliest days of transport ships from Africa and sail in the triangular trade. Free communities of color existed along the East Coast. They existed here in Kentucky. Large, thriving, free black communities. So while the records that we're going to talk about show a lot about the institution of slavery and enslaved people, like William Tucker, there are many, many stories of free black people making freedom for themselves right here in Kentucky, even when slavery is legal, owning businesses, willing land to their descendants, freeing family members. And we're going to talk about that tonight in Tucker's story. Not all African American households were separated during slavery. And tonight we're actually going to talk about a family that actually has to work within the legal system that exists to keep their family together. One thing about being an enslaved person and being a free person of color is that you had to know the law forwards and backwards. It could be the difference between freedom and re-enslavement. It could be the difference between life and death. You had to be savvy about what were the Commonwealth's laws, what applied to you, and in what ways you could use those laws to keep yourself safe or your family safe if the time came.
So what Dr. Holden's saying is you got to know your law. And even though the law could be against you, you got to know how to navigate through the system of the law in order to get past the barriers that have been set up, the roadblocks, to be beneficial in society for the common good.
We also have records of black businesses, black property ownership. All of this is in these records. And I'm really glad, when Shea and I were talking about this presentation tonight, we often like to start with names. Because folks also think, oh, enslaved people didn't have last names. That's not true. Enslaved people had last names. Whether their enslavers used them or not is another story, but enslaved people had last names. And they often kept them consistently over time. And Tucker keeps his last name. It's not the last name of his enslaver. It's his own last name. That we want to show, right, that African Americans are very savvy about the economics here. That folk wanted to build their own businesses. They wanted to farm their own land. They wanted to live together with their families and be able to provide for them. And so we hope tonight through this case study that we can show you how something that can sound as boring as a deed or a land record can actually turn into a story of a family legacy.
William Tucker, a free man of color. Let's look. The sample I have up here is a sample index that's been digitized, available online. I know it's hard to see it from this distance, but just pretend you at home. Or if not, you can pull up your phone and go to Fayette Deeds right now. You can look at what I'm looking at. But this is a sample on the left here is an index. And William Tucker, you see the Tucker is by last name, William, abbreviated WM. I put the star by it. And there are different dots to represent the records. Number one is the general index, alphas T through Z, page 175. That T for Tucker, you look for Tucker, find William Tucker. Two, you see that he was emancipated by George Trotter, June the 1st, 1815. It tells you deed of emancipation where that first arrow is. Number two, he purchases real estate on Upper Street in 1824. We will show you pictures of that later. And three, there's a whole list of people that William Tucker, as a free man of color, he emancipates: Robin, William, Carolyn Tucker, William Tucker Jr., Patsy Tucker, and others. And the question you want to know is, why is a free black man owning other black people? And then we're going to talk about that. And at the end, William Tucker's last will and testament list, when you die and you have a will, or if you don't have a will, if you own assets, they appraise the value of your property and do an inventory list. And then when you close out your inventory and appraisal, you have a settlement that tells you your value of what you're worth. So that's what we're going to be looking at. Another thing on our computer system, you can check the online index for the probate records. What you do, go to the instructions, you can look up, you see William Tucker, that's all his names. He has sale bills, sale land settlements, inventory settlement, sale bills, inventory, all those lists of records you look at to determine what he owned and the value of his property. Let's look, what can we learn from the records about his story of William Tucker, his enslaver? Well, we talked about on that record, George Trotter was his enslaver. George Trotter, you do your research. You got to look up George Trotter. When was he born? You do his research. He was born November 8th, 1778 in Augusta County, Virginia. So not only, now you know a starting place. You got to go back to Augusta County, Virginia to learn a little bit more about George Trotter. He's the son of James Trotter Jr. and Margaret Trotter. George was the husband of Elizabeth Hall. He's the father of Mary George James. And what you do, you find out as much information about the enslaver. Learn the story of George Trotter. Learn his location, where he's from, his family. Did he inherit William Tucker? Did he buy William Tucker from someone else? If you can't find it in Fayette County, you almost have to take a trip to Virginia, Augusta County. And first thing you do, call and ask them, do they have their records digitized?
Yeah, don't go all the way there if they're digitized. And I should just say, enslavers are typically way easier to find information on. They're enumerated in the censuses by name. You can figure out through the census records how many enslaved people they own. And censuses are super easy to access. And the Ancestry will charge you, but there's Family Search that provides that access for free. Knowing something about the enslaver, though, will give you some locations to start with. Understanding, well, when did they come to Kentucky from Virginia? How did he get out here? What was the shape and size of his own family? Should I be looking? Does he seem to be wealthy enough? They probably own some land. I bet I can find his deeds and property records in Fayette County. And that'll help you sort of locate an individual.
Mm-hmm. So now his emancipation. We know who his enslaver is. Who was his enslaver? Trotter. First name? George. All right. Now, his emancipation from George Trotter was in D Book M, page 415 in our office. He was emancipated December 12th, 1815. George Trotter sets William Tucker free. George Trotter, the elder of Lexington, Kentucky, now to the city of Philadelphia. That's where George set him free, Philadelphia. Frees William Tucker, a black man, June 1st, 1815. A true copy of this manumission is filed in Philadelphia at the Abolition Society at Philadelphia. Wow.
And his enslaver falls into this category of folks right after the American Revolution who really sincerely believe in the promise of the revolution. There are enslavers who say, you know what, these founding documents are attesting to the humanity and the rights that come with that humanity for all people. And if I'm really gonna say I'm a true son or daughter of this revolution, I shouldn't hold slaves. Now, spoiler, that was not the viewpoint of a number of people. But those people do exist, and they exist right here in Kentucky. There's actually a fairly rich abolitionist history here in Kentucky. At the same time, that Kentucky's super important to the slave trade. People who are neighbors have contrasting opinions about slavery as an institution. In Lexington, we have churches that hid people fleeing from slavery up the street from one of the most important auction blocks in the Upper South.
Yes. Again,
Neighbors, right, in disagreement about this. And it's important to note, right, because you always get these sort of, it's another myth, that, that was just their time. That's just how things were back then. They didn't understand that it was wrong. They didn't understand that it was bad. And you can always actually point to these examples in the records of people who said, no, I can tell that's wrong. It's not just their time. There are plenty of folk who knew full well that this was wrong and in a small way sought to right it.
All right. His location. One of the myths is when black people were set free, did they own any property? We know a lot of them were emancipated, and if you didn't have your certificate of emancipation on you, you can often get captured again and considered a slave. But in this case, William Tucker, when he was set free, he tried to build up a family legacy. He went and purchased property. He purchased property on Upper Street, which is in Lexington, and he purchased a home, and he started building his family wealth. He got a job, and he was a merchant. He would sell goods and supplies, and he became pretty wealthy off of that. He made clothing and items for other enslaved people and other free blacks, as well as the white community. And he built this wealth. And in this document where he died, it said he died in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So if you want to learn more about William Tucker, guess what? You gotta go back to Philadelphia.
But that dispels another myth, right? That African Americans weren't particularly mobile, right? He's emancipated in Philadelphia. He goes back and forth and back and forth. And that's not the story you heard, right? The story you heard, people get free, they go north, and they stay there. In this case, he's coming back to Kentucky. And why would he do that? Why would he come back and forth to Kentucky?
Yes, his family.
Yeah, family, right? And we see this time and time again, whether it's in records like Tucker's or in the many, many runaway ads that I'm digitizing through another project. We've got African Americans who are being noted by enslavers as far away as New Orleans. I've got an ad in the Daily Picayune, a New Orleans paper, that states that this woman is running where? To Frankfort, Kentucky, right? She's not trying to go to Mexico where there's no slavery. She's not trying to go to Canada. She's trying to come home. She's trying to come probably to the place where she's born and was sold from. And she's trying to come back again and again. And Tucker has family here. We know from these records his first wife, Carolyn Tucker, and a second wife, Hannah Tucker. We know the names of his children, Robin, William Jr., Patsy, who was a daughter of Caroline, Esther, William, Rebecca. We know that he actually was part of an entire community. And one of the ways that we actually know about these folks is because he emancipates them.
Wow.
So this question comes up a lot. Is it true that African Americans also owned slaves? Yeah, it's true. And there are a small number of people who owned and used enslaved people just like any other enslaver. Those people exist. They're in the records. I know a couple of cases in South Carolina. They exist. The vast majority of African Americans who are recorded as having enslaved people in their households own family members.
Wow, yes.
That they worked to purchase and bring into their households. And they had to be very savvy about the law because states like Kentucky, states like Virginia had a law about emancipated people. That if you were emancipated, you had to get out of the state in a year. And so depending on whether they felt like it was safe enough to emancipate someone, they don't want to emancipate their child and then they have to go to Ohio, right? They want to keep their family together. And so this is what we're talking about. Where in these records we can see the ways that people are using even exploitative systems to keep their family together.
You hear what Dr. Holden is saying? Yeah, they have to keep them together. If not, they would have to leave the state.
And to strategically emancipate them when they know, right, that they can best keep them all together, keep them in the state.
When you look at some of these deed records, when they had emancipated them, they use language like, "We emancipate you out of love and affection," and that points to the love, the quality that someone has for their family. Think of all the sweat, tears William Tucker had to do, the money he had to save just to keep his wife together. Yes, he has a second wife, but there were some issues that could have went on in between why he got separated from his first wife. And then lo and behold, Carolyn comes back in the picture and he sets her free. And think of how he had to do just to keep his family, the children together. And to preserve that. The deeds read, "Love and affection, I high esteem to set you free." Now you talk about an example of love. Today we have deadbeat daddies and baby mama dramas. But we see during a cruel, stressful moment what the sacrifice, and it's not just men buying their family and setting them free. It's women, mothers did that too. Wow, that's enough to make you want to cry.
And something that these records provide that a census record that just gives you a name won't, are descriptions of individuals. There's no photography, right? But if somebody gets picked up as enslaved, they want to be able to prove that they're Caroline Tucker, for example. So often these emancipation deeds include thick descriptions of the individual. So I can tell you that Caroline Tucker in 1826 looked to be about 40. I can tell you that she had light skin. I can tell you that she was about 5'5". I can tell you that apparently she was skilled and employable because she was not likely to become a county charge. So this is the kind of detail, right, that you can tell from records like this that don't exist in other places. It's not just that you can learn about the free community in Lexington or here in Kentucky, you can see them.
When you say a county, she wouldn't be a county charge?
Yes. Yeah, the county clerk, what happens is when you emancipate an individual, if they had nowhere to go or they were older and couldn't take care of themselves, they will become a county charge. The county clerk said, no, we don't want to take care of that person. So if we feel like they're not have a county charge, we'll put that in there. But if they are a county charge, then we will require people to post a surety bond. And then they will become responsible for that person. Then as the law progressed in the 1800s under the other constitution, then not only do we say they're a county charge, but they're not a charge to the Commonwealth state, because the state said, look, if the county don't want to take care of them, we don't either.
And it's reflective of something that's actually, it's lesser known, but it's it's actually pretty sad, that there was a time both in Virginia and Kentucky where folks would use enslaved people until they had been disabled by work or they were too old to work, and then emancipate them.
Yes.
Because they couldn't work anymore,
Wow.
leaving them destitute. Right?
Yeah.
And so these laws are made to keep that from happening. So knowing the law also helps us understand. Laws can sometimes tell us, right, what a society cares about the most. They can also tell us what society was actually doing, right? We've got speed limits, and I know everybody here obeys them all the time. But hypothetically, right? Let's say, they're there to tell us all sorts of things, like, well, at what point is somebody reckless? At what point, is the charge a different charge for going that fast? They don't actually, a posted speed limit doesn't actually tell us how fast everybody's going all the time. And similarly with these laws, why would you need a law like that? Because there was this phenomenon in Virginia, and it became a real problem, and they were leaving these people destitute after taking all their laboring years from them. So it's a part of that bigger system.
All right. His economics. You remember you go through those probate records when he died, William Tucker died. You add up all his assets and deduct his debts and everything. You come to find out his total value at that time, his total estate was $3,263.82. Somebody right now says, that's no money, Mr. Brown. But when you take the value of when he died and you look at the worth of what it is today, that's $121,000. And at that time, according to the CPI inflator calculator, he will be worth six-figure money. And that's a lot of wealth for someone who was once enslaved.
We wanted to take a look at some of these documents to talk about how this can turn into a story. So here's the language that Shea was just talking about. Here he is emancipating his son, William Tucker Jr. And this is happening in 1828. But you can see there at the top in the transcribed version that we see in consideration of the natural love and affection which I bear towards my son. And that language, it's very significant for the reasons that Shea mentioned, but it's very significant in the time. There are whole scientists making their careers off of what they called racial science. And one of their big theories that was widely accepted is that African Americans just didn't care about their children the way that white people did. That black women didn't feel pain in childbirth. That it didn't matter. It didn't matter if you sold their children away from them because they just didn't care. They wrote whole books about it, made whole careers out of these lies. And so to put this in a court record, right, to have this record, my natural love and affection, right, it's speaking to the kind of relationship that's actually going on here, that he didn't own his son because he wanted to own a slave. He owned his son because he wanted to be able to take care of him and eventually set him free. And he wants it known that this is about love and affection. It's not about a property exchange.
And if you look, I want to point out, that's our nice image on that side that you can see. You can blow that up. It looks real nice. This particular image is a deed mortgage. What happened, David Morrell owes Charles Thompson money. To pay Charles, David enters a $560 mortgage note with William Tucker, who is down to security. Now, an example to clearly understand, let's talk about today's description. It'd be like David up here owing a developer, someone who's developing his house land, named Charles, money for building his home and to pay him. David borrows money, the loan, from the bank. The bank's name is William Tucker, the free man of color. And to secure that promissory note with the bank, David uses the house and land, in this case, enslaved people, as collateral. If the loan is not paid, then collateral becomes William Tucker's. Now, one might say, why would William do that? And because, see, he's still preserving African American enslaved people, because if this debt ain't paid, what better person you want him to go to William Tucker, who knows how to navigate through the system of law and set people free. In other words, we talk about some other emancipators who have helped with the Underground Railroad. We need to consider William Tucker, how he navigated through the law and preserved the heritage of his people.
And while we're still looking into the relationship between Susan, Dinah, and John, it's very possible that they're family members. It's also very possible that they're a mother and children. And mothers and children didn't have to go together. So this is also a situation where Tucker, because he's so successful financially, right, it's possible he would never get a chance to purchase these folks outright. But through this financial maneuvering, could come into possession of them and eventually free them.
Wow.
So we talk about, this history seems so far away. We've shown you these old-timey documents in script handwriting. But the truth is, because Kentucky famously did not secede from the Union, many of our big cities did not get burnt to the ground in 1865. We still have a lot of our antebellum architecture. We still have a number of these sites standing, or at least standing in recent memory. And in this case, you can see Tucker's property today if you go to Lexington.
If you look here, he paid $300 in 1820. Remember I said he lived off of Upper Street? That's what the particular house looked like. You can visit lex.com, learn about the history of this house. $300 in 1824 is worth about $9,750 today. I'm trying to figure out how to buy a house at that price that looks that nice.
There's one or two other historic things in between now and then. But here's the property today with an estimated value. It's actually close to his net worth.
It's close to his net worth.
So the house is still there, right? We still have these spaces and places that are very much still standing. Which I'm a Virginia specialist. I've done a lot of my research in Richmond. I work on a place called Southampton County, Virginia, and that's not the case of Virginia. I'll tell you that. A lot of the architecture starts in the 1870s. So that Kentucky has this rich heritage, and that it's not burned. When I go to research in Virginia, they'll just look at you and say, ma'am, before 1865, we don't have anything for you. And so here, we actually have an opportunity to go back and recover specific stories like this, the specifics of Tucker's life. Well, Shea said this, and we wouldn't have our preacher professor thing going if we didn't talk about the offering plate.
Yes.
But it's a totally run by grants and donations. We got a grant from the Knight Foundation to start. We got some money from community outreach funds at UK. We also got some money from the Bluegrass Community Foundation. I want to shout out Lex Park because they give our workers free parking, which Lex Park has not ever given me anything free, but they have given them free parking to do this digitization work. So when we talk about community partnership, we really do talk about
Community
partnership, that there are a number of folks from the mayor's office to the parking authority to the clerk's office who've been so welcoming with space and with Shea's time and expertise to pull this together. And yes, we've got folks and students from a range of backgrounds who work on our project. And I want to say, tonight we're here to celebrate Black History for Black History Month, to tell you the story of one individual from the past who is not a famous name, could easily be lost in the shuffle, but managed to build a business and leave wealth to his family, and not just leave wealth, but grant them their freedom. But we digitized all the documents. We did not cherry pick or pick and choose. We did it all. Because Black history is the tide that rises all boats. So whether your ancestors were German and Irish immigrants, whether you are in fact descended from some of these big time landowners, or folks who were enslaved who you've been told you can't possibly find, we made sure it's all available. It's all available freely to the public. Because we really truly believe that Black history is our local history here in Kentucky. It's American history. And these stories, like Tucker's story, are both heartbreaking in some ways, but inspiring in others. He chose to come back here to home to build that business in a place that should have been the least welcoming, least possible place for that to happen. But I'll tell you, if in Black history you spend time worried about what's probable, you're going to miss the story, right? You got to focus on what is possible. And this story is what is possible in these documents.
So what do we do with the funding? We pay our workers. We don't just, they can volunteer if they want, but we believe paying offers professionalism.
I don't believe in asking people to work for free on projects about slavery.
Yes.
So we pay folks.
We pay them. We pay them. We do all that. We don't profit off of it. We do it for the benefit of the community. A lot of people have retired, and when they retired, they found out groceries and things like that are high. So that little extra income kind of helps out along that way. Students, give them a little income. So the more you visit Bluegrass and donate, the better it is, because what we also are doing, we're reaching surrounding counties that touch around Fayette County. We want to talk to other county clerks' offices, talk about this model project that we've done, and hope to inspire other county clerk offices and to find the resources in their community to do this type of work. And whatever we can do, whatever assistance we can provide, we would like to do that as well. And like anything, it takes money. And the money's out there. We just got to tap into that system and allow it to go in this grant fund and let it be used to pay people, because we believe that we want to preserve this. These books are tearing apart. Words are fading away. But if we can preserve this information digitally, it will be preserved forever.
And with that, we'll take your questions. Thank you.